What's up guys, I'm SaltEMike and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be hopefully one of a few breakdown videos from the panels at Citizencon, and with this one I chose the building of the dynamic universe, or the dynamic economy I should say, panel with TonyZ. And the reason I chose that one is I was kind of surprised, but it was quite polarizing. A lot of people were saying this is all the same stuff we heard from him last year, and I couldn't disagree more. It's kind of mind-blowing what I saw, and I thought it was pretty incredible. And I think what I saw was basically on par with importance with like server-side OCS, server meshing, AI improvements, and something like the actor status system that we saw at Citizencon. I think that this was one of the highlights. And kind of the plan for the rest of the video is to show you little snippets of the panel, and as always, like we do in a lot of our videos here, is inject some of my opinions in between. So starting out, TonyZ goes right into the problems that they're dealing with and why we basically only have the Stanton system up to this point.
Thus far, we've been focused entirely on a single system, Stanton, which includes 4 planets, 12 moons, 225 economic nodes, 44 trading outposts, 13 rest stops, and 50 asteroid fields. So yeah, it's really big. The point of this presentation then is to give you a better understanding of how, when the first one's taken so long, we're aiming to kick things into overdrive so that we can deliver new systems much more quickly.
So yeah, there's a lot going on in the small Stanton system that we have right now, and Tony goes a bit more into detail on what sort of problems they've been dealing with.
So let's look into each of these areas in a bit more detail and see why we've struggled to set up a single solar system, and at the same time get a precise understanding of what needs to happen so that we can start moving a lot faster. This, however, is where we start to run into some major problems. Designers have to explicitly link missions to various constructs within the game. An NPC mission giver, for example, or a probability volume covering the area around yellow. This isn't dynamic at all. Mission content is fixed to specific NPCs and locations, so there's no evolution. The universe is completely static. Another major problem is that we don't have sufficient context to properly customize the missions. At a macro level, the game doesn't really understand the concept of a route, much less what miners traversing that route should be carrying, or what condition they should be in, or which direction they should be if if they're empty, heading towards a mine, or full, bringing the results of their efforts back to a refinery. This lack of context means that we can't exploit a mission's ability to have information injected into it for customization, and that means that you see a lot less diversity, despite requiring just as much work.
Quite simply, the current mission system isn't ready for a dynamic economy, and I kind of wonder if these simple and really handcrafted missions that we currently have that are very static are because Tony had to work on this stuff and we needed something to play. But there's even more problems here, and this is kind of the key problem for the dynamic economy in my opinion.
The last problem, and it's a big one, is that there's no NPC regulation of the mission content. Missions are the basic units of work for the economy, and if someone doesn't do what needs to be done, then everything grinds to a halt. In a properly functioning system, NPCs need the ability to step up. As with missions, economic nodes don't have any real context in terms of supply and demand, and there's no systemic flow of goods throughout the economy. Why does a refinery want ore? Why is an NPC willing to buy some drugs from you? Where does the shop get the goods that it's selling? Right now, the answer to all these questions is the same. We fake it. These products you deliver to a node then, they don't actually go anywhere. There's no real demand. This is impossible to balance because while production and consumption are fixed, the player count isn't.
They need these NPCs to balance the economy, and that's why I bought into Star Citizen, was that the player base couldn't ruin the economy. And to be honest, the fact that everything is so static, they can't change on the fly based off of what we're doing in the game currently. And that's kind of rough, so they need a tool here to fix that problem. So what are their solutions to these problems then?
What we actually want is a dynamic, logical universe. We want the demand for goods and services to be the result of a legitimate economic need, and we must have sufficient runtime context so that we can customize these modular mission templates. NPCs must be able to contribute in helping to turn the gears of the economy, from buying and selling goods to creating and accepting missions. The system needs to automatically balance itself so that we can focus on the high-level rules instead of the details. All of this, too, has to be incredibly computationally efficient, which means we need a more focused simulation engine, one that's only concerned with what we need to achieve the desired effect. If we're ever going to reach a point where we can deliver new solar systems in a reasonable amount of time, then we're going to need to make a quantum leap.
This is a massive list of tasks, and they need to develop some technology in order to handle this. And they did.
So this is quantum, and I know what you're thinking, and I've seen this before. If the visuals look, particularly familiar, it's because we started with the solar system map that we released years ago. Now, I mentioned that we're connected to all the real-time data. Let's go ahead and see what the players are up to. Each of those red dots is a real player, thousands of them across well over 100 servers. Over there on the right, you can see the current player list. Let's go ahead and see what a couple players are up to. Just go ahead and highlight them so we can see where they're at. And you can actually see some deaths down on the planet there. So obviously there's been some conflict there. And you actually see, let's go ahead and back out a little bit and find there's a contract to the right. You have access to missions, so you can see that Clipsos Norwang is requesting personal transport to Lorville, and he's willing to pay $4,500.
Wow. The level of access to our information while we're playing is insane. But I don't see any tools to build the dynamic economy here, and Tony addresses this.
So the primary reason for quantum's existence is to enable us to have one unified world where we can, simulate millions of NPCs and feed back into that all of the player actions into one unified whole. So let's go ahead and start by bringing 1,000 quanta to life. These are simulated entities. And as I mentioned, the real significance of this is when you're talking about working out the vast multitude of details that we really need to allow this universe to evolve and feel dynamic, we don't actually need all of the incredibly high fidelity, super computationally expensive stuff that we would get if we were actually simulating these NPCs.
Now, this is a really important point, that these quanta are just simulations going on in the background, and the scale of Star Citizen needs this type of simplicity. It's not about showing every NPC at every little detail. It's about making the economy awesome. And what are these quanta doing, and what's the real point of them is what they share with us next.
Now, all of these quanta have basically come to rest within the system, and the reason for that is because there's nothing for them to do. There's no reason for them to get up off of the couch. We're going to add a little bit of interest to the system by adding an aluminum mine to Delamar. So we've now injected a mine onto Delamar, and yet you see the quanta still refuse to do anything, and that's because there's no economic reason for them to do it. There's nothing to do with the ore that they could go and extract. So now we're going to go ahead and add an aluminum refinery to Crusader, and immediately you will see the quanta start springing to life. And what's happening is they've all figured out that refinery, it wants to build up a stockpile of aluminum, and in order to do that, it needs some raw aluminum ore, and thus it's willing to pay for it. And so the quanta are seizing upon that economic opportunity, heading out to Delamar, doing the work, extracting that ore, and taking it back to the refinery.
So this tool just worked, and the guys kept adding things on because the refinery filled up and the quanta had nothing to do, and I think you kind of get the point thus far. They just kept adding more loops to the system to show what the tool could do. Now, this is all really cool, but it seems quite simplified for a game like Star Citizen. So they're clearly showing us like an early look at this tool, but they have more layers to add on top of it in the future.
The next step of what we'll be working on is they'll actually require ships. Ships require engines, and so all of a sudden there's a real demand for how many power plants do you need, how many ships do you need. It all follows the same logical equation. So thus far we've shown a very basic economic loop. One commodity, one refinery, one factory, and one retail shop. The real world, of course, is far more complicated. You'll have lots of different commodities, refining and production nodes, retail shops, and of course players in quanta competing against one another for a limited supply of goods and services. It's this competition, this economic natural selection, that ensures that things remain in balance, that a logical equilibrium is reached.
So they make it really clear that the tool's not ready and they have more to add, but they know what they need to do. So the demo continues, the guys continue to add mining nodes and factories and shops and show all the tools, but one thing that I want to show you is that the graphs are the real, like, kind of key tool here. So they can, like, see in real time what's happening to the economy by looking at these graphs. And what's really big about this is they can see if the economy is going to break as they add more things to the star system. It's basically foolproof is what it feels like, because they can test something out before it ever hits our hands. Now, Tony and Jake add one more wrinkle to the system to kind of show the power of their simulation thus far.
All right, so now we've introduced some pirates. Let's go ahead, and so you can see that there are 4 pirate kraken. There's the Nova Riders, Low Riders, Nine Tails, and Dusters. Pirates have to return to one of their bases in order to refuel, rearm. Let's go ahead. If you notice, they head to the areas of highest value. Let's go ahead and zoom in there. And you can see that those are missions being created by the NPCs, no different than players would. In other words, you see a lot of deaths on a route that's got a lot of value. And go ahead and hover over some of those contracts. These are contracts that are being thrown out by the NPCs on that route. What's happening is the NPCs are basically being, some of the freighters are being picked on by the pirates, the ship is being destroyed, and now that NPC has ejected and needs transport back to civilization. And so they're requesting that. And these are missions that would be fed back into the game that you'd see, and you could wind up accepting these.
Really cool. And the prices of things obviously shoot up with the influx of pirates, so they add some security to the system.
So here comes some security. And what you'll notice is that security is drawn to areas of conflict where there's a lot of deaths and such. So they're going to wind up gravitating towards those areas where there's a lot of piracy. The police will wind up patrolling an area, so they're in constant motion, whereas the pirates basically are enabling quantum interdiction fields. That's why they're basically picking a route on, they're picking a particular location on the route between, between 2 locations, and they're basically, lying in wait. And the security, which doesn't know exactly where they are, is scanning the area looking for them. And so what you notice here is that the pirate situation is starting to look a lot better now that security's shown up. And so what you have here is a perpetual game of cat and mouse.
So the key point that I want to share with that clip is that they gave traits to all the different quanta to act a certain way, like the pirates interdicting and the security looking for these pirates and missions being created. But all of this is going on in the background, so you're probably asking, like, how does this affect me while I play the game, other than prices going up and down and maybe some service beacon missions being created. And this next part is really where this tool touches us while we're playing Star Citizen.
Let's go ahead and turn on the grid. And what you're looking at here is one of the big problems I referred to earlier is how we wind up getting samplings of this, of how we generate probability volumes. And so what this is showing you is we can look at one of these high conflict areas, and it's basically tabulating exactly what's in that area. So you can see that there are 10 total quanta, 1 freighter, 11 pirates, 5 security. It also shows you the total value being transported. You know exactly what's going down that route. This is the information that quantum, and it's a small piece of the whole, this is what it would wind up feeding periodically to the probability volume services, so that designers no longer need to go in and say, oh, well, we're going to hard code a certain amount of security, a certain amount of freighters, and it can never change. We ship it, that's all it's ever going to be. In this case, the simulation is running, it's constantly ebbing and flowing. And your actions over on the game side get factored into this result, just like any of the quanta in this simulation.
So when we're interacting with an NPC, or when we come across a situation like an interdiction, the game will know exactly what type of NPC, what ship they're flying, how damaged they are, what weapons they have. So many bits of information, and it's going to feel so real and right. This is huge. And this is huge for not only a game like Star Citizen, this might be huge for the economy of video games as a whole. But let's take a step back here. This is just a tool on a web page that they're showing us. This actually isn't implemented in the game of Star Citizen yet. So I'm sure it's going to be very difficult to implement. There's going to be lots of bugs and lots of issues and things like that. And it's going to take some time before this gets implemented. So the dynamic mission system is on the roadmap right now, slated for Q1 2020. And I tell you what, I assume that this is like the first part of the quantum tool coming into play and interacting with us. And I can't wait to see it. So guys, that's going to end this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Leave any comments below. Let me know what you thought about my opinions, what you thought about the tool and what I showed on the screen. And yeah, hit that like button, subscribe, and all that great stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next video.